हेलो एंड वेलकम टू नेबर्स टॉकिंग। और आज है हमारे साथ स्वारा भास्कर, जो कि बॉलीवुड की इंडियन फिल्म सिनेमा की एक एक्ट्रेस हैं। इंडिपेंडेंट फिल्म्स करती हैं और बहुत सारी जो बहुत मशहूर किस्म की फिल्में हैं, जैसे तन्नू वेड्स मन्नू, प्रेम रत्न, धनपायो और बहुत सारी फिल्म्स। सो आज स्वारा, वेलकम टू द शो। और आज आपसे बात करनी है कि बॉलीवुड कहाँ जा रहा है?
Thank you so much, Aisha ji. Always a pleasure chatting with you, and very happy to be here. Well, Bollywood, I guess Bollywood has just tasted a huge success with Pathan very recently. So I think Bollywood अच्छी जगह जा रहा है और I hope कि Bollywood में जितने भी लोग हैं वो सारे बहुत खुश होंगे और बहुत सेलिब्रेटरी माहौल में होंगे बिकॉज़ आई थिंक कि पिछले कुछ सालों से कई तरीके की बातें की गई हैं बॉलीवुड के बारे में और कई तरीके के स्पेकुलेशन किए गए हैं बॉलीवुड के बारे में कि बॉलीवुड का टाइम खत्म हो गया एंड बॉलीवुड इज डन एंड बॉलीवुड इज यू नो नो लॉन्गर व्हाट इट यूज्ड टू बी and I think that the king of Bollywood, as it turns out, the king of Bollywood and everyone's favorite Shahrukh Khan is the person to prove all the naysayers wrong. उन्होंने सबके जितने भी हेटर्स थे और जितने भी लोग थे जो डाउट कर रहे थे उन सबकी बोलती बंद करा दी. So I think Bollywood is in a good place.
दैट्स गुड टू नो, बिकॉज़ परेशानी हो रही थी ना। देखें, तेलुगु तमिल फ़िल्म्स जो थीं, उनको उनका रीमेक जो था वो बहुत आने लगा था। और यकीन करें आप, हम तो साउथ एशिया में तो देखते हैं बहुत लोग बॉलीवुड, पाकिस्तान में भी लोग देखते हैं। तो
Of course.
वन वाज़ ट्राइंग टू फिगर आउट कि क्या स्टोरीज़ नहीं है, क्या मसला है?
Well, I'm honestly I think that थोड़ा सा ये जो तेलुगु तमिल कन्नड़ा फिल्म्स का बॉलीवुड में चलना या डब्ड फिल्म्स का बॉलीवुड में चलना जो एक तरीके का स्टोरी बन गया था. फर्स्टली आई थिंक इट्स ग्रेट बिकॉज आई थिंक दैट they're all Indian language films, right? Including Hindi films, including Tamil,
राइट,
Telugu films. And I think if Indians and globally people are watching Indian films, other Indian films from other Indian languages, that's not something you should be worried about. That's something we should be very happy about. That's something we should be very proud about. India's, and this is something that I often say in many other contexts, but the strongest example, of course, is India's
हुँ,
film industry and diversity, which is that India's diversity is one of India's most special and strong points. So, if anything, we should be celebrating that. And I think that for me, the success of South language films in the North is a sign that maybe finally the North audiences are opening up and accepting other language content, other language people. So honestly, I feel it's a good thing. I feel it's not something that we should consider as threatening. There has been an interaction between the South and the North forever and ever, in every sense of the word, whether it's food, whether it's
राइट,
culture, whether it's clothing, whether it's people to people interaction. My parents I'm a mix. My father is from Andhra, my mother is from Bihar.
राइट,
So it's literally almost like, the Telugu film industry and the Telugu watching industry audience and the Hindi film watching audience ka marriage. So I think that, and we've had technicians, actors, actresses from the South forever and ever, directors from the South also. It's This is not so, we've had films, heroes like Rajnikant and Nagarjun sir, who have
राइट,
acted in Bollywood in the 80s and 90s. Sri Devi, who is the biggest female superstar of Bollywood, is also the biggest female superstar of the South language movies.
राइट, राइट,
Really, really special person. So many of our actresses, the biggest actresses in India, whether from Wahida Rahmanji to Himmalini, Sridevi, Tabu, even Deepika, and all are South Indians themselves and have started their careers in the South. So, I feel like this divide is actually a little bit of a constructed divide. And if
ओके,
it is getting blurred, that's a great thing. This is not to take away in any way from the credit of the South language industries themselves. They are all independent industries that are very, very strong, very, very popular, and have like an independent identity. And I think that if those identities are now shining in the whole world, I mean, RRR, a song from RRR, which is
Yeah,
a Telugu film, has just won the Oscar. Um,
right, right.
that's great. I think
And
that
that's
that's
and that's exciting.
it's exciting. But again, that film also has a Bollywood actress in it as well. So it has two Telugu film actors. But I think Alia is in that film. So she's a Bollywood. I
Yeah.
mean, you don't get more Bollywood than Alia Bhatt at this point. So I think it's a nice time where we should celebrate the amalgamation instead of being petty about it. Like I'm talking for us, for Bollywood itself. Instead of being petty about it, look, a healthy competition is a great thing. And if films are working at the box office, it doesn't matter what language it is good for all producers, because it's bringing cinemas back into the audience. And we've had a very, very bad, I mean, the worst affected people in during COVID, businesses, amongst businesses, if you look at other theater business,
Right.
other exhibitors. So this is great, right? It doesn't matter which language, log cinema mein kam se kam aa to rahe hain.
That's true. You know, perhaps जो चीज मैं आपसे पूछना चाहती हूँ, जो one thing is the stories, right? Uh, so Bollywood has also progressed, moved, and I'm मैं ये नहीं कह रही कि ये अच्छा है या बुरा है. Just asking. So 1970s की अगर आप फिल्म्स देखें तो वर्किंग क्लास was celebrated, मजदूर, किसान, ये वो. Then 2000 onwards you see a shift. NRI पे focus है. So can you walk us through the viewers through this के आपके ख्याल में how has on the storyline itself, where has Bollywood progressed? How?
That's that's a uh, that's a really good academic, solid question, Aisha ji. Well, I think that see, I like to always, or in my limited understanding, I feel कि जो फिल्में होती है ना कहीं पे भी पूरी दुनिया में, वो आपके पॉपुलर डिस्कोर्स और पॉपुलर इमेजिनेशन को मिरर करती हैं एक तरीके से.
ठीक.
70s का जो दौर था, it was still the Nehruvian phase in India, where we were very much, as a society, we believed in socialist ideals, or in a larger, in a loose understanding of socialism. So that kind of is reflected, and class was like, was like a big issue. Then if you look at 70s, it's also where a lot of the working class movements are going on. The trade unions are really
Right,
strong. um, and Indira Gandhi herself, who was in power at that time, was always, on a this sort of roti kapda makan kind of platform, is what she came
right,
on. So, very much working class issues were central to the imagination of Indian people. And you see that reflected in films, in the whole rich poor, like as you said, a lot
right.
of the films were about class conflict, were about rich and poor. Rich boy marries poor girl, poor boy marries rich girl, falls in love
Hmm,
with rich,
hmm.
this kind of thing. Again, always, if you look at it, the villain in those times were the smugglers, because
Right,
India had very strict rules about foreign investment and about import export. And so smuggler was the big figure at that time in the imagination. So there was always that that thing ki Ajit used to play that character. And ki Mona darling Sona Varsova jetty Varsova pe aa gaya hai, or whatever, that kind of those lines. Or the big businessman, if you look at Amitabh Bachchan's films, and the whole angry young
right,
man, who is the villain? The villain is the rich corrupt businessman, because again, at that point, that whole idea of corruption of the big money, of the rich
hmm.
people, was a something very much in our imagination. And the poor person was always seen as being an honest, laboring, hardworking person.
Right,
uh, with the 90s and the liberalization of India, when the Indian markets opened and India became more embracing towards capitalism, and capital became freer in India, consumerism kind of full fledgedly became sort of the culture of the Indian
right,
people and masses. You begin to see that reflected in Hindi films. So when the Indian audience became aspirational towards capitalist goods and consumer goods, and that became accessible to them, a big revolution happens in India. One with liberalization in the early 90s, but with 2000 with telecom. and with the
Hmm.
availability of cell phone, and the cell phone becoming cheaper and more accessible to people, so information becomes easier. Indians start, and in general, the because of more foreign investment in
ठीक.
India, there was a huge spurt of economic growth. So people could go,
Sure.
had spending money, they could go out. You see all of that reflected in your films. Suddenly, everyone's wearing designer clothes. Suddenly, the
Hmm.
stories are about Indian people going abroad. Suddenly, and because the NRI becomes so much the focus of the Indian imagination, because now young people are, they were always going out, but like now it's a big thing that going out to study, going out to get jobs, going abroad. And because the NRI market opens up for Hindi films. So suddenly, in the late 90s and 2000s, Indian films started showing in box offices in the US, UK, Canada, actually releasing on the same day as they were releasing here,
Right.
right?
Right. Right. Right.
Suddenly, the Indian producer also realized that there's a huge market of the Hindi audience. And when I say the Hindi audience, what I'm actually saying is the Hindi, Urdu, Hindustani audience. Because
Yeah. Yeah.
actually, Pakistani को भी हिंदी समझ में आती है, मतलब जिस तरीके की
बिल्कुल.
बोलचाल
बिल्कुल.
हम बोलते हैं, या जिसमें उर्दू भी है, हिंदुस्तानी भी है. So actually, if you look at it, a Bangladeshi, an Indian, a Nepali, a Pakistani, an Afghan, somebody living in the UAE, in the Middle East, in Dubai, and all the diaspora communities of UK, Canada, USA, of which are South Asian, can actually follow Hindi films.
Of
So
course you do.
suddenly there's a huge market. So the Indian producer became very aware of that. And I think that Yashraj and Karan Johar were the two, so Yashraj and Dharma were the two production houses that picked up on that, because DDLJ, one of the, and this is something I think a lot of people don't realize, DDLJ made such a huge amount of money in the overseas market. Nobody
Hmm.
expected
Hmm.
that. Nobody saw that coming. So once that happened in 95, then producers realized that, oh, there's a huge market here. So let's start involving them also. I'm guessing like this
ठीक.
is the thought. And so you suddenly see this spate of NRI films. If you look at, and a lot of them had Shahrukh in them, a lot of them was done by Yashraj Dharma. So whether you look at Kal Ho Na Ho, you look at Salam Namaste, you look at, Kabhi Alvida Na Kehna. I mean, so many of them. So there's like this whole spate of films that are set and shot entirely abroad. And they're working abroad, they're working in India. So that was very interesting. Then there is the, again, I would, for me, the next chapter is 2011 onwards, and the release of Tanu Eds Manu, actually, which is coincidentally a film that
Right.
I'm also in,
Yeah.
which is a film, well, that one, and I would say Gangs of Wasepur.
Right.
So uh, Anurag's big coming of, coming to the big acceptance in commercial space was with Gangs of Wasepur, because that's his big
Hmm.
first commercial success, and Tanu Eds Manu, which is also a huge hit, which are both the coming back of the small town to the Hindi filmscape.
Right.
And
Right.
suddenly you see again then films being made about small towns. So you have Bareli Ki Barfi, you have you have Neel Bate Sannata, you have Bareli Ki Barfi, you have Ishq Zade, you have like a whole spate of then films that are all about the small town and set in small town. That's because suddenly, in from the 2000s onwards, and 2005 especially onwards, you all the writers and all, like the film industry got corporatized, it also became more accessible for outsiders. So you had so many writer directors who were not from Bombay. They were not born in Bombay. They were all people coming from small towns with Bollywood dreams, and they were telling the stories they know of the world they know. So I think that all of that, I always say films are fascinating because they reflect the people who make them and the
Hmm.
audiences that
Hmm.
make them. It's really like an interesting mirror that kind of interacts in myriad ways. So I
But
think
but
that,
but but tell me, let me cut you here. What about people who act? ना कि आप पे आते हैं, आप ये बताएं कि आपके लिए स्टोरी की चॉइस जो है, how do you pick your script?
so I say this, that I think people, uh, I always start by saying that the thing with our choice is that our choice is from a limited pool. I can only, as an actor, choose from what is being offered to me, right?
ठीक.
I can't naturally go and choose what is being offered to Alia Bhatt or Deepika Padukone or some other actress. I can pick make the wisest choice from what is offered to me. So my
Right.
personal, and this is of course my own trajectory, which is that I started out as a character actor. So I started out with supporting roles in films. So
ठीक.
when I got Tanu as Manu, and when I had to audition for it, the choice was to a struggling actor who had just kind of arrived in Bombay. Being the choice was that you will get to be in a big film with Kangana and Madhavan, who were then, from my perspective, big stars, and I mean they are still big stars in their own right. And I was like, well, yeah, why not? And it was a good part, so it made perfect
Right.
sense. Even though a lot of people will tell heroine aspirants that don't be a best friend, because for you get typecast. But I was just like, let's take the opportunity, let's do a really good job, and let's kind of see, because I didn't want to wait, because as an actress you also have this age factor which kind of keeps playing in your mind ki acha umar ho rahi hai, bade ho rahe ho, 1 saal ho gaya, 2 saal ho gaya, 3 saal ho gaya, like that. um After that, I would say that I have always chosen roles that give me a chance to perform. And I've been lucky
Okay.
that even in the few films that I did as a supporting actor, so whether it was Tanu as Manu or Prem Ratan Dhan Pai or Ranjana, they all were good parts that were written very well. So my characters were always remembered. Like, to date, the kind of love that I have got for Ranjana, I don't know that I've got that for any other role, uh, for my role
Right.
as India and Ranjana. So I was very lucky like that, and all those films were big blockbuster hits. Then the smaller, more indie films that I did, like Nilbate Sanata, Anarkali Ovara, those characters and those stories were so strong. They were so content oriented, so performance oriented, that it kind of, it helped me build my credibility as an actor, and gave me an opportunity to really explore and work hard and perform. And luckily for me, I mean, both those films did well in their own way. Nilbate was a commercial success even at the box
Right.
office, and Anarkali just became like this, very achieved like a cult status as an indie, as a really important indie film. And then a film like Veeredi Wedding, which was commercial but also still doing something new, I chose the part which I felt was the most unusual for me. And I had a feeling that, like, I think I had a feeling that this part will get talked about because of
Okay.
the controversy and the scene, the masturbation scene. And I had never done anything like that. So I asked Ria to give me that part, and she did, for which I'm happy and grateful. And I think that worked out really well for me. And I think that even after that, whether it was the web series that I've done or the other films that I did, whether it was a Jahan Charyar or now the current film I'm doing, Mrs. Falani, or all the various web series I've done, whether it's Bhag Bini Bhag or Rasbhari or Flesh, I think I always try to do something that's new so that I don't get bored. I always try to do something that I find difficult so that I learn something. And I always, as much as possible, try to get a part that is either the primary part or an important part, so that when the audience walks out, they'll be forced to remember uh, me. So, in that sense, I'm very selfish, and I have, like,
As you ought to be. But ये बताइए कि what about, there is another challenge there, in the form of Netflix. बहुत
yeah.
सारे लोग उधर भी जा रहे हैं ना. Have you thought
Yeah.
about it yourself?
I, I mean, I think that I think that Netflix is not I think it's not actually a challenge for actors. Like, I think it's for actors, it's a boon. And I mean, I noticed this myself. Like, the show that I did with on Netflix is a show called Bhag Bini Bhag, which was a like lovely
Yeah.
show, very well received. And I was stunned to see the kind of audience feedback it had, because it was a show that got watched all over. As I said, the Hindi, Urdu, Hindustani understanding audiences. So whether it was Bangladesh, whether it was Pakistan, whether it was UAE, whether it was India, it was being watched everywhere. So I was getting like feedback from audiences across. So I think that for actors, whether it's a Prime Video, Netflix, or all these streaming platforms, they I think that's a boon. um I think that the big Bollywood stars were, and like whether it's the Salman Khan and the Shahrukh sir and those people, I think they perhaps are the people who had to negotiate um, what that did for the idea of stardom, because suddenly Netflix started throwing up, and Prime Video started throwing up a newer kind of star, which is the OTT star. So
Right.
So I think that that challenge is a challenge for the typical only Bollywood actors. But I think that they've also, like, I think that the thing with technology is the best thing to do it is there's no point fighting it. It's best to adapt to it and, like, ride the wave. And I think that that's what all
Right,
Bollywood actors are doing now. So if you see, all big actors are now themselves doing shows on streaming platforms, either starring in them or producing them. So
right,
I think they've
right.
figured out how to negotiate it. And I think that the the big I think that because of the timing of COVID, I think the
Hmm,
big sort of, I would say, damage. I mean, damage is a strong word, but I think the biggest challenge that Netflix and Prime Video and these streaming platforms posed were to the theaters, because the
right,
theaters really
right.
got a double whammy, right? They got hit from both
Huh.
sides. They had COVID, they were shut down, and then everybody started watching the streaming platforms and subscribing to them, and like audience taste patterns changed, consumption patterns began to change. So I think the theaters got kind of like, were in a, for a few years, like 2 3 years, they were like, there was like, we don't know what's going to happen. But I think with films that have come out now, whether it's Pathan or it's, you know, just Kartik Aryan had a big hit, Bhul Bhulaiya 2, or, the few films that have come out
Hmm,
that have been
hmm.
big hits. I think that that has also recovering now. I don't believe you can take the film experience out of, for Indians. Yeah, it's a social experience, or for even
Yeah.
Pakistanis, I'm sure. Like, it's वो एक उसका एक अलग मजा है कि पूरे परिवार के साथ या फैमिली के साथ तैयार होके या दोस्तों के साथ तैयार होके फिल्म के लिए जाना. It there's more to it than just a viewing experience. It's a social experience. It's a bonding experience.
No,
आप वो
definitely, definitely. That's definitely the case. One question that I have is that you also have now एक फेज आया है जिसमें कुछ सीनियर जो अदाकार थे वो वापस आ रहे हैं, जैसे शर्मिला टैगोर हैं, बहुत अरसे के
yeah.
बाद वो वापस आई हैं. सो व्हाट इज इट, आई मीन, इज देयर, आई मीन, व्हाट वुड यू से कि ये मार्केट है बुजुर्ग उनकी, या हाउ डू दे रिक्रिएट दैट अट्रैक्शन?
I think that I think it's lovely, firstly, and I think it's such a pleasure to be able to see so many of these icons on screen again. Like, uh, but I think that, for our profession is a very strange profession, so it does come and go in phases. So you'll always see actors, even like whether it's Dilip Kumar Saab or even Amitabh Bachchan sir. There'll always be those couple of years where they kind of, you don't see them so much, and then there's like a comeback, once they're more.
Hmm.
So I always feel that between that 45 to 55 age, you suddenly lose the actors. With actresses, it's a little younger. Once maybe 40 to 50, suddenly you won't see them, and then they'll come back in a new avatar. And that's happened with Sridevi also.
Right,
And
right.
like middle, she had a break, and then she came back with English. um i think that I think it's nice because it gives the audience a little bit of a moment to have like nostalgia and miss them, so that when they
Right,
come back,
right.
you're like, oh, they're back. You have that feeling. And I think, barring Anil Kapoor is actually a tremendous example, because he's the only actor that I can think of who has not had a break in his career, who has
Right.
worked non-stop,
And
even
it's
when
fantastic
it's
to see him
amazing.
on screen.
He reinvented himself while working. Like, most actors take a break and then reinvent themselves, actors and actresses. Anil Kapoor is the only example that I can think of who has worked consistently and reinvented himself while working. Like, I don't think that there's a
Hmm.
single year that has gone by with no release by Anil Kapoor. Maybe 1 year or 2 years, but like, otherwise he's always been in our imagination. So I think he's a fantastic and interesting example. But other than that, I think that, yeah, I think it's nice that actors get that chance to kind of take a break, live their lives, and then come back when they're in a new phase of life, and then the audience by that time has missed them and wants to see them back. So I think it's nice. Like, I think it's a nice negotiation, and the people who are able to do it, the actors who are able to do it, good for them, and lucky for us as audiences.
Of course, definitely. One last question, and that is कि अभी पठान आई है, बहुत धमाकेदार फिल्म, एंड
Yeah,
लोगों ने एंजॉय भी किया. बट
yeah,
एक चीज जो समझ आई उस फिल्म के बारे में वो ये थी कि it's it's a इन एक्शन है, बहुत सारे गाने हैं, द बेस्ट एक्टर्स आई कैन थिंक ऑफ, तो सारा बॉलीवुड का मसाला है, राइट?
Yeah.
सो स्टोरी शायद इतनी नहीं है, लेकिन ये है कि मसाला बाकी है। सो टू बी सक्सेसफुल, क्या यही मसाला, यही फॉर्मूला जो है वो चलेगा?
Well, no, I hope not, because I think that there shouldn't only be one formula that works. I think that there should be many things that work. I think that Pathan occupies. I mean, I also saw it. I also enjoyed it, and I think that Pathan was really an interesting film because it was not just a film. It was also India saying to Shahrukh, "Yes, we still love you." And I think that
Definitely.
that was the biggest thing in Pathan for me. And it was also like the Indian audiences almost giving it back to the naysayers and the haters and the trolls, saying that we still love Bollywood, because there's also been like 2-3 years of a lot of Bollywood bashing within Indian media
True,
and discourse. Okay,
true.
and there's a different politics of that. I don't want to get into it, but so I think that Pathan is a special film because it was really like India standing up for Shah Rukh and being like, we still love you, you're still the king of Bollywood to us, and also kind of standing up for Bollywood in some sense. Other than that, yes, it's a formula film. It occupies that spy genre kind of film, so it has all those उसके अपने जो होते हैं कि एक हॉट लड़की होती है, वो मिस्टीरियस सी होती है, गाड़ियां होती हैं, लाइक फैंसी लोकेशंस होते हैं, गाने होते हैं, वो सब. सो इट वाज अ फन फिल्म लाइक दैट. But I think that there are other films that have also come out that are working in their own way. Like, we've
Right.
recently had a release by Rani Mukherjee, which is a film called Mrs. Chatterjee versus Norway.
Yeah, yeah. Right,
That's a
right.
very different kind of a film. It's a very, in some sense, serious film. It's a very emotional film, and it's a smaller film, but it's not done
Okay.
badly. It's made some. I think its first week collection was 15 crores, or maybe that was a 4-day collection, and that's not bad for a film like that, given COVID, given all the other limitations. So I feel that फ़िल्म को अपने, वो किस टाइप की फ़िल्म है, उसका बजट क्या है, उसके हिसाब से हमको जज करना चाहिए कि उसका रिस्पॉन्स भी कैसा रहा है. एंड इन द पास्ट आल्सो इन बॉलीवुड, you've had examples of all kinds of films working. Yes, there is this kind of a, whether it's an Tiger Zinda Hai, Pathan, War, एक ये बड़ी जो वो वाली फ़िल्म होती है, उसका अपना एक एक मार्केट है, वो हमेशा लोग देखते हैं, उनको मज़ा आता है, बिकॉज़ इट्स एन spectacle, it's an experience. Then you have the Sanjay Leela Bhansali kind of film. But this year, Sanjay Bhansali made a very different film called Gangubai
Okay.
Kathiawadi, led by a
Yeah.
female. Very unusual, no love story in that sense, typical, very atypical for Bollywood. But that film was a huge success on the box office. Again,
Right. Yeah.
given its own parameters.
It's a
So
fantastic film,
it's a great film
by the way.
also. So I think that and great performance by Alia. So I think
Yeah.
that everything works. If a film is good, if the story is good, if it relates to the audience, and if it's made in the budget which is reasonable, I think filमें चल सकती हैं. It's not that audiences आज की date में especially, audiences are so smart. They appreciate good things. It's not that they don't appreciate good things. I mean, sometimes they appreciate not so good things also, but a good thing generally does get appreciated. So I feel hopeful, all in all, about content in Bollywood, in India, and in South Asia in general. We had a screening of a Pakistani film last week in Delhi called Joyland,
Okay. All right.
which was,
Okay.
I mean, it was not in the theaters. It was a private screening, but it was attended, and I saw people on Twitter writing about how many, like how it was house full, and lots of people were watching it, and there were tears, and they were crying and clapping in the end, and it got a huge standing ovation. So
अच्छा.
ऐसा नहीं है. अच्छा अच्छा कंटेंट, there is nothing more powerful than stories and music. Art in general is something that can travel any boundary, and it can cross any border. So we should be lucky to have that kind of power in our midst, and we should use it well, I always feel.
जॉय की तरह हम तो चाहते हैं कि और भी कोऑपरेशन हो इंडिया पाकिस्तान की, और जो पहले था कि आते थे पाकिस्तानी
Yeah,
एक्टर्स आए,
definitely. We
एंड
miss Fawad. India misses
oh,
Fawad.
I'm sure they do. Swara, thank you so much. आप आई Neighbours Talking पे, and I hope we lots of success to Mrs. Falani.
Thank you.
And when is it coming out, by the way?
hopefully by the end of this year, because I'm still shooting for it. I still have about a week of shoot left, and then we'll start
Okay.
dubbing, the post work on it. So there are some months of work left on it, like post, after we complete the primary shooting. But yeah, it's a lovely film. It's a very sweet film, and again, it's very universal theme. So it doesn't matter which country you're from and where you live, you will appreciate and you will love it. So I'm very excited for that film to come out.
Best of luck with that. Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much.
Thank you, Aisha ji. Always a pleasure.